Good Saturday morning to all of you. Hope you all are following the US presidential elections with a lot of fervor. A lot of interesting things happening there, and this will definitely help your GDPI preparation as well. So, do read up articles about the US presidential elections, guys. We have been doing a lot of CAT questions, and today we are going to do some CAT questions in both verbal and RC. So, great, let's begin. Hi, I'm Munira Lokhandwala, and I'm Calcutta alumna, a serial 100 percentiler in the CAT and a 99 percentiler in the GMAT. I also have a CAT verbal book published by Wiley, available on Amazon, guys. I take regular sessions on the Unacademy YouTube Crack Cat channel. You can also find me on the Unacademy app. So I'm taking a lot of special classes and plus classes. This week, I'm taking 2 special classes on Tuesday and Thursday, both on grammar and how you can make this very vast topic, right? Grammar can go on and on. People have written these fat books on grammar. Remember the Brennan Martin? So what we are going to do in these sessions is we are going to take all those rules and synthesize them into 6 possible errors that are tested. These cover 99% errors that are tested, and we will actually come up with an algorithm on how to go about looking for those errors and how to correct those errors, right? So Tuesday and Thursday, I hope to see you there for the grammatical usage sessions. I'm also taking a lot of plus batches. I'm going to talk about that as well, guys. But first thing you need to do is search for Unacademy Learning app, download and install it. Within that, guys, you have to go for the CAT goal and the plus CAT course. We have close to 200 educators from across the country in different regions with different languages and expertise. So we have teachers that are 100 percentile, such as I am, right? And teachers that have more than 10-15 years of experience. So you will have a great choice to choose who you want to learn from. In fact, you can decide to learn from all of us also. So you have immense batch flexibility. You have immense flexibility in deciding how many times you want to watch a video, which batches to go for, right? So this kind of choice you don't get anywhere else. And at the price that we charge, it's really negligible. We are the best value for money in the entire industry, right? So here are 2 more reasons why you should be on Unacademy straight away. One is the National Scholarship Test. So every Sunday at 5 o'clock, we have a test for only one section. So today from 5 to 5, not today, tomorrow from 5 to 5:40, you're going to be tested on the quant section. It's a well-designed test with great analysis and a very relevant rank, guys. And to top it all, the top 50 scorers will get Amazon vouchers worth 5,000 rupees. So 5,000 is not a small amount. It's not anybody's pocket money. It can be somebody's contribution to a new phone, right? So please go ahead to subscribe for this, enroll for it, and take the test. I hope to see you for the analysis, guys. As I said, we are also starting a plus batch. So the plus batch is starting from the 4th of November, where I'll be taking LRDI. So I hope I'll see you there. With subscription to go for, well, we can talk towards the end of the session. You can use my code Munira10 to get a great discount, right? Cool. So here is the puzzle that I gave you all yesterday. Given that p is prime, when is 2 raised to p plus p square prime? So again, before you always start thinking about how to prove this, you should just start with some numbers. So what is the smallest prime? 2. So when I put 2 here, I get 4 plus 4, 8, right? Which is not a prime. Then let's put 3 here. When you put 3, you get 8 plus 9, which is 17. Great, this is a prime. What about 5? 5 will take us to 32, right? 2 raised to 5 plus 25, which is 5 squared, so you get 57. What about the next prime? 7, which is 128, 2 raised to 7 plus 49, so you land up with 177. Let's try just one more prime, 11. 2 raised to 11, it is not too bad, I hope. In fact, as CAT prepped guys, you already know it. It's 2048 plus 121. So you land up with 2169. Now you may actually notice, so I wanted to do 11 because I wanted to first of all show that his 7 is not happening, right? See, anyway, this is an odd case because this is the only even prime. Since this is the only even prime, it is an odd case, right? It's an unusual case. तो ये तो हम वैसे भी ignore करेंगे. You should never even try and substitute, right? But from here, you may think कि they will all end in 7. So I wanted to do 11 to show that no, they don't all end in 7. Okay. So what is common between, let's say, these three values? Anything common? They're all multiples of 3. All three of them are multiples of 3. So does this have to be true? Let's see. Starting from p is equal to 5, which is where we are here, right? P is equal to 5. All primes leave a remainder of 1 with respect to 6. Right? All primes leave a remainder 1. So plus 1 or minus 1. And that is pretty easy to see, right? Because any number with respect to 6 can leave any of these 6 remainders. Right? So this plus 5, I'm writing it as minus 1. Now this cannot be prime because it's a multiple of 6. This is a multiple of 2, right? I can take 2 common. This is 3 times 2k plus 1. So this is a multiple of 3. So cannot be prime. Multiple of 2 cannot be prime. So there are only 2 possibilities where a number can be prime. Either 6k plus 1 or minus 1. Okay. So this is something that can help you for various questions. Right. So let's start off with k. The prime has to leave remainder plus or minus 1. So when you square it, the remainder will always be plus 1. Right? The remainder will be, when I square it, right, I'll get 36k square plus minus 12k plus 1. So all this is a multiple of 6 except the last term. So remainder with respect to 6 will be 1. Now, ये 1 है. What about 2 raised to p? So if I look at 2 raised to p, I can write this as 3 minus 1 the whole raised to p. Right? Now, p from 5 onwards is always odd. Correct? The prime number is always odd. So when you expand this, this is going to leave remainder minus 1 with respect to 3, which is the same as remainder plus 2 with respect to 3. So when we add these two numbers up, the overall remainder is 1 plus 2. It is 3 with respect to 3, which means always this is going to be a multiple of 3. This term starting from 5 will always be a multiple of 3, which you can see, right? 3s are, 3s are, 3s are. So the only possibilities are prime less than 5. And for that we checked out, okay, yes, 8 plus 9, there is one value. Okay. And of course, this doesn't work. So when is 2 raised to p plus p square prime? When p is equal to 3. Right? Great, guys. Let's now move on to some verbal questions. So this CAT question, right, had 5 passages, out of which we have already done 3. Let's do the remaining 2 today, along with some grammar. So the focus also is on grammar this time, and critical reasoning. From ancient times, men have believed that under certain peculiar circumstances, life could arise spontaneously. From the ooze of rivers could come eels, and from the entrails of dead bulls, bees, worms from mud, and maggots from dead meat. Right? Okay, without any life already in it, life could arise spontaneously. This belief was held by Aristotle, Newton, Descartes, among many others, and apparently the great William Harvey too. The weight of centuries gradually disintegrated men's beliefs in the spontaneous origin of maggots and mice. Let me just change the color. Yeah. So a lot of earlier people had these beliefs, right? But dhire dhire, this belief got disintegrated. But the doctrine of spontaneous generation clung tenaciously to the question of bacterial origin. Okay, it may not be true for mice, it may not be true for maggots, but bacteria khud apo aap janam leta hai. In association with Buffon, the Irish Jesuit priest John Needham declared that he could bring about at will the creation of living microbes in heat sterilized broths, and presumably in propitiation theorized that God did not create living things directly but bait the earth and water to bring them forth. So from a sterilized broth, जिसमें कुछ नहीं हो सकता, he said he could create microbes, and hence God also must have used earth and water to create living things. In his dictionary philosophy, so philosophy dictionary, Voltaire reflected that it was odd to read of Father Needham's claim, while atheists conversely should deny a creator, yet attribute to themselves the power of creating evils. So it was odd because as believer in God, he should not have said that life can occur spontaneously. But wrote Huxley, the great tragedy of science, the slaying of a beautiful hypothesis by an ugly fact, which is so constantly been enacted under the eyes of philosophers, was played almost immediately for the benefit of Buffon and Needham. Okay, so what is the tragedy of science? A beautiful hypothesis, right, is killed by an ugly fact. So these guys tried to kill the beautiful hypothesis, which is the fact of life's spontaneous creation. The Italian A.B. Spallanzani did an experiment. He showed that a broth sealed from the air while boiling never develops bacterial growths and hence never decomposes. To Needham's objection that Spallanzani had ruined his broths and the air above them by excessive boiling, the A.B. replied by breaking the seals of his flask. Air rushed in and bacterial growth began, but the essential conflict remained. Whatever Spallanzani and his followers did to remove speeds and contaminants was regarded by the spontaneous generist as damaging to the vital force from whence comes new life. So here is the essential conflict that this Italian guy said that if you completely seal the broth, तो bacteria नहीं होता, which is how our milk cartons also work. Okay, the milk doesn't spoil because it has been vacuum sealed, right? As soon as you allow air on it, bacteria starts growing. So whenever they tried to remove contaminations, these guys, the Needham guys, said that you are removing the vital force. Thus doubt always remained, and into the controversy came the titanic figure of Louis Pasteur. Milk. Believing that a solution to this problem was essential to the development of his theories concerning the role of nature in bacteria, Pasteur freely acknowledged the possibility that living bacteria very well might be arising anew from inanimate matter. To him, the research problem was largely a technical one, to repeat the work of those who claimed to have observed bacterial entry. For the one that contended that life did not enter from the outside, the proof had to go to the question of possible contamination. Okay, the research problem, to repeat the work of those, one has to show that outside contamination ka question has to be resolved. So Pasteur worked logically. He found during the experiments that after prolonged boiling, a broth would ferment only when air was admitted to it. Therefore, he contended either air contained a factor necessary for the spontaneous generation, or viable germs were there in the air already and seeded in the sterile nutrient broth. Pasteur designed ingenious flasks whose long S-shaped necks could be left open. Air was trapped in the sinuous glass tube. Broths boiled in these flask tubes remained sterile. So air was there in the flask tube and air was trapped. So in some sense, air was also boiled. Okay. तो वो वाले broths में bacteria नहीं होता था. It remained sterile. Sterile here means without life. When their necks were snapped to admit ordinary air, bacterial growth would then commence. But not in every case. An occasional flask would remain sterile, presumably because the bacterial population of the air is unevenly distributed. The forces of spontaneous generation would not be so erratic. So if it was really spontaneous generation, then it would generate all the time. Why would it, be sterile sometimes and generate life sometimes? So hence it is about bacterial population ka uneven distribution. Continuous skepticism drove Pasteur almost to fanatical efforts to control the ingredients of his experiments to destroy the doubts of the most skeptical. He ranged from the mountain air of Montenwort, which he showed to be almost sterile, to those deep, clear wells whose waters had been rendered germ-free by slow filtration through sandy oil. So he tried to do this experiment in various places just to show to the most skeptical. Skeptical is someone who doubts a lot. कि नहीं ऐसा होता है करके, right? The latter discovery led to the familiar porcelain filters of the bacteriology laboratory. With pores small enough to exclude bacteria, solutions allowed to percolate through them could be reliably sterilized. So that is how, in fact, some of our water coolers also worked in the beginning, some of our water purifiers, right? That you had all these layers that water had to pass through and water automatically became clean. The argument raged on and soon spilled beyond the boundaries of science to become a burning religious and philosophical question of the day. For many, Pasteur's conclusion caused conflict because they seemed simultaneously to support the biblical account of creation while denying a variety of other philosophical systems. Okay, so Pasteur's conclusions helped the biblical account of creation. As I was saying, right, Needham went against it. But at the same time, a lot of other philosophical systems went for a toss. The public was soon caught up in the crossfire of a vigorous series of public lectures and demonstrations by leading exponents of both views, novelists, clergymen, and friends. Perhaps the most famous of these evenings in the theatre, competing perhaps with a great debate between Huxley and Wilberforce for elegance of rhetoric, was Pasteur's public lecture on April 7th. Having shown his audience the swan-necked flask containing sterile broths, he concluded, and therefore, gentlemen, I could point to that liquid and say to you, I have taken my drop of water from the immensity of creation and I have taken it full of the elements appropriate to the development of inferior beings. And I wait, I watch, I question it, begging it to recommence for me the beautiful spectacle of the first creation, but it is dumb. Dumb since this experiment were begun several years ago. It is dumb because I've kept it from the only thing man does not know how to produce, from the germs that float in the air, from life. For life is a germ and a germ is life. Wow. Right? So he says that he used to point to those flasks and say that, he has taken a drop of water from this big immensity of creation. And that water is full of the creation of life also that has made us. But this water cannot create life on its own. It is dumb, right? And why is it dumb? Because from this he has kept away the only thing man does not know how to produce. And that is the germs that float in the air. Okay, never will the doctrine of spontaneous generation recover from the mortal blow of this simple experiment. And it is not. Today, these same flasks stand immutable. They are still free of microbial life. So, ये swan neck flask में अभी भी there is no spontaneous generation of bacteria. It is an interesting fact that despite the ringing declaration of Pasteur, the issue did not die completely. And although far from healthy, it is not yet dead. In his fascinating biography of Pasteur, René Dubois has traced the later developments which saw new eruptions of the controversy, new technical progress and criticism. Okay, so this controversy is not yet dead, right? Some biographer of Pasteur who wrote his life story, right, has traced some other developments which again led to this controversy again, and new energetic figures such as Bastien and the immortal Tyndall, right? They were against the doctrine of spontaneous generation. There was also new sorrow for Pasteur as he read years later the last jottings of the great physiologist Claude Bernard and saw in them the mystical suggestion that yeast may arise from grape juice. Even at this late date, Pasteur was stirred to new experiments again to prove to the dead Bernard and his followers the correctness of his position. It seems that spontaneous generation is not only a possibility, but a completely reasonable possibility which should never be relinquished from scientific thought. So, some Burnett said that you can generate yeast from grape juice, and that's how, in some sense, you make wine, right? So, again, Pasteur tried to prove with experiments that what is the correct way to look at this position. And then it seems that spontaneous generation became a possibility. So, great, let's look at the last passage. Before men knew of bacteria, they accepted the doctrine of spontaneous generation as the only reasonable alternative to a belief in supernatural creation. But today, as we look for satisfaction at the downfall of the spontaneous generation hypothesis, okay, so they look at satisfaction. So people are satisfied that spontaneous generation is not possible. We must not forget that science has rationally concluded that life once did originate on Earth by spontaneous generation. So even if you think things cannot spontaneously generate right now, shuru mein life happened because of spontaneous generation. It was really Pasteur's evidence against spontaneous generation that for the first time brought the whole difficult question of the origin of life before the scientific world. In the above controversy, what was unreasonable was the parade of men who claimed to have proved or who resolutely believed in spontaneous generation on the face of proof, not that it cannot occur, but that their work was shot through with experimental error. So when it failed to show spontaneous generation, it said that the work had some experimental error. The acceptable evidence also makes it clear that spontaneous generation, if it does not occur, must obviously be a highly improbable event. Okay. So it is unlikely it will happen under present conditions. Logic tells us that science can only prove an event improbable. It can never prove it impossible. Yeah, so if something does not happen, doesn't mean it is never going to happen, right? And Gamow has appropriately remarked that nobody is really certain what would happen if a hermetically sealed can were opened after a couple of million years. Modern science agrees that it was highly impossible for life to arise in the Precambrian seas, but it concluded nevertheless that there it did occur. कि life का spontaneous creation in the Precambrian seas. It was unlikely, but it happened. With this, I think Pasteur would agree. Aside from the theoretical implications, these researchers had the great practical result of putting bacteriology on a solid footing. It was now clear how precisely careful one has to be to avoid bacterial contamination in the laboratory. We now knew what sterile meant, and we knew that there could be no such thing as partial sterilization. Either it is completely sterile or it is not sterile at all. The discovery of bacteria high in the upper atmosphere, in the mud of the deep sea bottom, in the waters of hot springs, and in the Arctic glaciers established bacterial ubiquity. मतलब वो हर जगह होता है, is almost absolute. In recognition of this, Lord Lister introduced as aseptic technique into the practice of surgery. कि पहले things should be made clean. That is the aseptic technique. It was the revolution in technique alone that made possible modern bacteriology and the subsequent research connecting bacteria to phenomena of human concern. Research which today is more prodigious, more creative than ever. We are just beginning to understand the relationship of bacteria to certain human diseases, to soil chemistry and nutrition, and the phenomenon of antibiosis, wherein a product of one organism, example penicillin, is detrimental to another. Right, so penicillin is detrimental to other bacteria. It is not an exaggeration then to say that the emergence of the cell theory represents biology's most significant and fruitful advance. The realization that all plants and animals are composed of cells which are essentially alike, that cells are all formed by the same fundamental division process, that the total organism is made up of activities and interrelations of its individual cells, opened up horizons we have not even begun to approach. The cell is a microcosm of life, for in its origin, nature and continuity resides the entire problem of biology. तो इससे सेल थ्योरी पे भी ध्यान हुआ and cell theory advanced. Okay, so everything is composed of cells. That realization really helped further the research in biology. Okay, so this whole thing is about how life can occur spontaneously. That belief was shared by some, right? And then Pasteur spent a lot of time negating that belief. But in the past, when life did occur, it occurred simultaneously, right? And how this whole debate has helped further research in biology and in bacteria, right? So great, let's look at some questions. Needham's theory that God did not create living things directly was posited, right? So basically, if God did not create living things directly, then it went a little against what the Bible said about God creating human beings. So it was not an attempt to support his assertion by religious doctrine, right? And he was not placating, but placating matlab किसी को शांत नहीं कर रहा था, right? His religious fears. It was an attempt at saying that the God was possibly offended with this assertion, and that is how God would perhaps react. So answer is option C. It can be inferred from the passage that Buffon and Needham were definitely contemporaries. Okay. Huxley also wrote about it. So we need to find out whether Voltaire was a contemporary or not. The Italian and यहाँ पे wrote Huxley reflected it was odd to read. So definitely Voltaire was there along with Father Needham, right? Because this is more or less in the present that Voltaire read it. So answer is that they were all contemporaries. Great. According to the passage, Pasteur's precursors in the field worked on the basis no. Precursors मतलब पहले वो जो काम किया था, right? That was not, he was trying to see whether it is there or not. He was working neutrally. There was no precursor which was for or against it. Unlike his predecessors, worked on logical premises, right? So ये तो clearly बोला है कि he worked logically. Titanic figure, freely acknowledged, was purely a technical one, worked logically, right? So this is clearly given. So B looks good. Stood to benefit, कुछ उसका फायदा नुकसान का बात नहीं किया है. Developed the idea set forth. No, in fact he went against. He wanted to prove. He didn't develop it, right? So he disproved Needham. So answer here is option B. Pasteur began his work on the basis of the contention that either air causes it because of some factor in it, right? Or air is necessary for the spontaneous generation. Okay, so either it's a factor necessary without germs in it, or there are germs in it. ये तो clearly बोला है, correct? So A works. After prolonged boiling, a froth would ferment only when air was admitted to it, not at all. Only when नहीं है. ऐसे भी the froth was fermenting. That was again mentioned. Where is it? Let's see, is it on the next page? Only reasonable alternative. Subsequent, we were just beginning to soil and this and that. Where would commence? Relinquished. That living bacteria to him was merely a technical one. Worked logically after a broth would ferment. Only when air was admitted to it. Okay. So B is also true, and hence the answer is both A and B. The porcelain filters of the bacteriology laboratories owed their descent, right, not to his homeland but to the well water. Okay, because of the well water, Pasteur could see how this water was cleaning things, and hence he used that. This was used for the slow filtration, right? So answer is only B. Great, let's move on to the next one. What, according to the passage, was Pasteur's declaration to the world? Nobody could deny the work that he is not going to declare himself. Science would forever be indebted to his experiments in bacteriology. Again, this is not something Pasteur is going to himself declare to the world. The doctrine of spontaneous generation would never recover from the mortal blow dealt to it by his experiments. Right? This is what he declared right in that whole theater, in the drama, right? This statement has been made. So your answer is option C. Would regret? He doesn't use the word regret. What, according to the author, was the problem with the proponents of spontaneous generation? Okay, their work was ruined by experimental errors. Not that they had no scientific basis, right? He said okay, there can be some basis for it, but they didn't take care of contamination. So answer is option B. One of the results of the theoretical crossfire regarding bacteriology was that you could see how a thing could be completely sterile or not sterile. There's no partial sterility. Aseptic technique was introduced in surgery. The meaning of sterile was clear to all. All of these, right? All of these happened. So answer here is option D. Right? Great. One of the reasons for the conflict caused by Pasteur's experiment they denied the existence of God as creator. ऐसा कुछ religion का connection नहीं है, right? They seem simultaneously to support while denying a variety of other philosophical systems. So this is true. This is mentioned, right? Academicians and scientists, this is too extreme. People did accept his theories. There were too many and there was no confusion. ये सब बात नहीं हुआ है. So answer here is option B. According to the author, it is an exaggeration to say that cell theory represents biology's most significant and fruitful advance. Too extreme exaggeration hai, nahi hai, we don't know. So this we could not hold. This we could not go for. Could not hold his own against the contenders. No, of course he can hold his own. Cell theory rendered null and void all the other. No, again it did not render null and void. Represents, yeah, this is good, right? Most significant and fruitful advance. So answer is option D. This is mentioned also right in the end. Most significant and fruitful advance. So answer here is option D, right? Great, let's move on to the next passage. The next passage, guys, is very factually oriented, lot of numbers. It mostly talks about mutual funds and the death of mutual funds, right? So a lot of figures here. This we'll read a little more quickly, okay? The end of mutual funds when it came was sudden but not unexpected. Okay, it was expected. But over 10 years has been scripting its own growth demise, embarking on a reckless course of high risk, unhealthy pastimes and unchecked diseases, maladies. Ironically, but fittingly too, the very hand that had supported and sustained it through the early period was one that finally killed it, euthanasian syringe. The individual investor it was who made the mutual fund post-liberalization, most vibrant vehicle, and it was the same individual investor who brought down the act with a virtuous performance. It was well done, bringing it down. Okay. So the mutual fund as we know it may be dead, but it died of many things. Primarily a cancer that ate away its innards. A cancer that destroyed the value of the investments were made to service the 85,000 crore that India's investors had entrusted with them ever since 1965 Unite Trust of India made, right? It disgraced the unit scheme US 64. तो तब से ये कैंसर शुरू है. A cancer that grew from the refusal of the men and women to manage the mutual fund with a mixture of caution and aggression. Okay, so instead of doing that, they adopted an indisciplined, unplanned, free from the hip approach, fire from the hip approach, to investment. Fire from the hip is when cowboys used to, just fire straight away from here instead of actually taking aim. So it's a risky thing. A cancer that ultimately robbed the mutual funds of the resources they would have to use to pay back their investors and hence leaving the investors on death row, मतलब उनको मरने के हालत पे छोड़ दिया. Indeed, the scandal that US 64 had been brewing for years was only one, but not the first. Okay, there were a lot of other things जिसकी वजह से the mutual fund के इसमें not तराजू, what is it called, the treasure chest, right? उसमें पैसे नहीं थे. In quick succession have emerged reports of more and more fund schemes जो अभी once you see वो क्या है तो उसके पास पैसे नहीं है. Their ability to meet their promise of assured returns to investors have demolished. At least 37% have promised investors assured returns of over 15% for 5 years and repurchase prices well above their net asset value. So all these things were assured. 15% return, we'll buy back at this big amount, right? 18 big schemes due for redemption will be unable to service their investors. The shortfall is a big 4,685 crores, which is 75% of the amount handed over to fund managers. When an assured return scheme runs into problems, investors view it as another letdown, मतलब वापस निराश किया. Had they but known of the actual practices seen in the offices which have translated into these results, investors would have shown their disgust long ago. So now एक example है कि mutual fund company that manages more than a dozen schemes. According to an unwritten but formalized principle, each scheme takes it in turn to sell some of its holdings to its sister schemes, booking fat notional gains and posting NAVs. So I start with one scheme and I sell that at a higher price to another scheme, which is my own scheme. So I get good returns on the first scheme. Okay, while investors responded by pouring even more of their savings, the profits were clearly on paper. In the offices of another asset management company halfway across Mumbai, the demand for cellular phones peaked 6 months ago. Everybody wanted a cell phone. Its employees realized that making their personal deals using information gathered in the course of their professional work was best done over cell phone so that company records wouldn't show the calls being made. देखो, सब fraud करने के जरिए. Obviously, the hot tips went to fatten their pockets and not the investors' pockets. Earlier, quite a few merchant bankers entered to use the corpus to subscribe to the issues they were managing. It took a crash in the primary market, not ethics or investigations, for this practice to stop. So, primary market में जब ये crash हुआ पूरा of this, using mutual funds to subscribe to their own issues, then the practice stopped. The practice did not stop because people suddenly became ethical or because the investigation went on. So filled with fear and disgust, loathing, right, and anger, the investor has therefore decided to postpone or adjourn or give up the mutual fund. According to MRDA, 342 investors, right, now rank mutual funds a lowly fourth on safety. So mutual funds come after bank deposits, gold and real estates, and only fifth on returns. Okay, so safety may fourth and fifth on returns, and only 14.2 will even consider investing in a mutual fund. So itna mutual fund went for a loss. Still, it is a species that has died, not its every member. The ones that have survived are the bright performers who beat the market benchmark, the 100 script, the BSE National Index, by the widest margins within the three genres: growth, income, and balance. However, even their star turns have not been able to stave off the stench of death over the business. कि ये जो थोड़े बहुत जो अच्छे किए हैं, उन्होंने भी they could not stop the death, right? And if you actually do a post-mortem, mutual funds reveal a sordid saga of callousness and calumny. Callousness means carelessness. Calumny is cheating. Sheer disaster stares the mutual fund in the face, and a catechism could destroy the savings of a lot of investors. A value research estimate of probable shortfall that 18 assured return schemes will face adds up to, वापस ये नंबर आया, they've already given us this number, कि किसी ने एनालाइज किया है और ये 18 जो assured return वाले स्कीम है उनके पास इतना पैसा कम है. An independent audit of the 60 assured return schemes managed by the public sector mutual funds, right, conducted by PwC, estimated a shortfall of between 2,500 crore and 3,000 crore. In 99 alone, judging from the present NAVs, the 4 schemes due for redemption, which is, this is scheme 1, this is scheme 2, this is scheme 3, and this is scheme 4. They are heading for a shortfall of 1,700 crores. As of June 98, the country's 252 fund schemes, with the UTI alone controlling the fate of 50,000, मतलब it's 70,000 में से 50,000 तो सिर्फ UTI के पास था. That is 11,000 crores less than the money invested in the schemes as of June 30. मतलब already यहाँ पे 11,000 crore का loss है, right? So we can see it has wiped out 11,000 crores. Of course, every fund is paying for the sins of the black sheep. जो जिसने गलती किया है कोई एक दो फंड में, all the other funds are paying for it. For the villain of the piece was UTI. ये है main villain, right? 95 funds managed by the public sector banks and institutions, the value of whose corpus is fell from this. In fact, these funds contributed a lot, with the private sector funds boosting their corpuses for only so much. For investors, this has translated into an option of either exiting at a loss or holding on कि आगे जाके कभी ना कभी it will give some profit. On November 2098, a depressing 77% were quoting at discounts of between 5% and 40% of their net asset values. And what of the NAV themselves? The units of a shoulder slumping 15% were worth less than their par values. मतलब जितना invest किया उससे नुकसान हुआ है 15% में. And US 64, of course, continued to languish with an NAV of just rupees 9.68. Even if there are schemes that have performed individually well, that the mutual funds have collectively failed to deliver, couldn't be more obvious. So investors' murderous mood, right? They are damn pissed off, can hardly be debated. Their genesis reveals just what blinded the mutual funds to the possibility of failure. Why couldn't mutual funds see that they are going to fail? 40% of the banks and insurance companies promoted funds in operation were launched between 87 and 93, when the stock markets were bull dominated, when the stock market was going up. In a period that saw only one bear phase, the BSE sensitivity index climbed by 346%. Being successful with equity investments required no skills, only investable funds, because everything was going up. Nor was fundraising a problem. Everyone wanted to get into this equity boom. So between 1984 and 89, they have had 13,000 crore as subscription, and in the next 5 years they picked another 45. In January 94, the UTI's master gain mopped up a stunning 4,700 crore, while the most awaited Morgan Stanley growth, a showcase, right, for the fabled fund management meteor of foreign mutual funds, took in rupees 1,000 crore in just 3 days. Low entry barriers, a so-called sound track record, a general reputation of fairness and integrity, an application of 25,000, registration fee of 25 lakhs, and an annual fee of rupees 2.5 lakhs made entering the business a snap, explains Ajay Srinivasan. Mutual funds were misunderstood by investors. Everyone thought this was one-way ticket to a jackpot. Intoxicated, fund managers poured in more and more of their corpuses into equity, ignoring the downsides, confident that the boom would last forever. In the process, they ignored the very concept of risk management, ignoring the safety net of fixed income instruments, and accusing those of people who said कि नहीं थोड़ा cautiously behave करो कि तुम coward हो करके. In 1995, ABN estimated 70% of the money being managed by mutual funds had been funneled into equity. Whether they knew it or not, they were breaking away from the trend in the US, where the industry primarily began by investing in the money market, which is the debt market, loan market, with only 25% for stocks. US में सिर्फ 25% stocks पे थे, बाकी 75% was in fixed income assets. Okay. Only in the past 15 years, after operating for more than 7 decades, have those funds ventured into equity, the US funds. Unfortunately, their success blinded the fund managers to the fact that they were riding a wave, not navigating something जो आपको धोखा दे सकता है. As Vivek Reddy puts it, it was the stock market conditions that helped the mutual funds deliver results, not superior investment skills. Then the stock markets collapsed and never quite recovered. The Sensex pre-fell from 4306 to 2812. That if you wait long enough, share prices are always bound to rise. And the mutual fund, unused to a diet of falling equity indices, collapsed too. The quantum of money mopped up suggests the reports of his extinction have been greatly exaggerated. Right? In 1997-98, Indians entrusted 88,000 to the mutual funds, with new schemes alone getting 12,000. Questions R.G. Sharma, how do you explain that Dhanvarsha 12 and Dhanvarsha 13 managed to mop up 335 crore? Not quite a loss of fate, would you say? Think again. In those 12 months, those very investors who took away 16,000, leaving only 2,000 more in the funds. What's more, since none of the withdrawals could have been made from the new schemes, the old schemes obviously gave it all up, effectively yielding 10,000 to angry investors who took away their money. It's the same story this year. So people want money from their old schemes instead of giving to new schemes. Sure, some people are still putting money into the mutual funds. The real reason money is flowing in from two genres of investors, neither of whom is the usual investor. Quintessential is usual. The first comprises people in the semi-urban and rural areas, for whom names like LIC represent safety and assured income. Importantly, this category investor isn't clued into the financial markets and is unaware of problems, right? That market is fairly stable. However, as soon as the fundamental problems hit their dividend paying ability, even village wale people, right, will not get into mutual funds. The second genre of investors explains why have been successful in soaking up large sums. These are the so-called high net worth players, corporates and individuals, who are aggressive about managing their wealth and look closely at comparative performance. While their fastidiousness has forced them to pick up private sector mutual funds, their interest does not represent every investor's disillusionment. Disillusionment means nirasha. So this whole passage, right, is first of all about, bolstered by a lot of facts, right, about how mutual funds have behaved right from 1984 till now, right, how they have lost money, why they have lost money, how they have been different from the way the US mutual funds have been managed, ending more or less with the kind of people that are still currently investing. One is, of course, the urban investor, the rural investor, right, and the second is the high net worth individuals. So this is the whole passage. Now, guys, let's look at the questions. The amount of money entrusted to the care of the mutual funds was. So again, fact-based, I have told you that you should not remember each and every fact. That will really take up a lot of your reading time. It is just best to go back and check. Okay. So, yahan pe to you don't have how much was invested, right, in mutual funds. But if you go back, 67,000, and here you have the countries managed with 70,000. This is where they mention, yes, that there is a 4,000 ka shortfall. and the amount of money invested is 85,000. Correct? So we're made to service the rupees 85,000 crore. So, right, the amount of money entrusted to the care was 85,000. The end of mutual funds was carried out at the hands of, so this is right at the beginning, कि जिसने शुरू किया था कहानी, which is individual investors, उसी ने कहानी खत्म की है, right? It's right on the first part only, you can see it here. Right? The individual brought down the curtain. Correct? So here the answer is option C, the individual investors. According to the passage, the flaws of the mutual funds lay not in liberalization nor in stagnation. It was because there was irresponsible handling. And this, guys, you should remember. This is a part of the whole story. According to the passage, one of the reasons for the failure of the mutual funds was again their irresponsibility, indiscipline. Not the devil may care. It was not that they were too risky. They were not fooling intentionally. There was no deceiving going on, right? And not that they could read the pulse. They just invested based on the bull market. They didn't realize that the market would drop. So there was no discipline. There was no balancing, right? So answer here is option A. According to the writer, one of the fallouts of the end of mutual funds, right, is that at least some of the big schemes due for redemption will be unable to service their investors. And this has been repeatedly told us. कि 4,000 types का shortfall है, 4,000 something for the 18 top funds. Then even for the top 60 जो assured returns वाले हैं, वहाँ पे भी shortfall है. So at least some of these big schemes will not be able to return their money. Only very few will be unable. Very few नहीं है, 18 है. Right? And compared to very few and some, obviously A will be more accurate. Here you're actually giving a number of more or less. Here you're just saying some. Some can be more also, some can be less also. So we'll choose A over B. None of the big schemes due for redemption will be able to service. Here none is too extreme, right? So answer here is option A. Great, guys. It can be inferred from the passage that money was siphoned away. Again, this is about deceiving. जानबूझ के कुछ fraud हुआ है, ऐसा कुछ नहीं है. Siphoned away means, you take money outside of the country and invest it in a Switzerland bank or something, right? You take money away. That is not what was happening. It was just generally irresponsible and indisciplined investing. So there was general malpractice. Money invested was never returned. Never returned nahi hai. Some investors, in fact, took their money back. Media has not been spoken about at all. So answer here is option B. Right? The current rank of the mutual industry in terms of safety. Okay, so this I remember. Safety, it is 4th, and returns on deposit, it is 5th. Right? So this I remember. Answer is option C. Right? The increase in the number of cell phone subscription was because people didn't want to use company landlines to place hot tips. So calls for personal deals couldn't be lodged in the company's records. So A is best. Found it easier without involving, ऐसा कुछ नहीं है. The company was scrupulous, नहीं है. ये भी नहीं है, right? So answer is option A. It's not about personal details. According to the passage, mutual funds caused a loss of how much? 11,000 का घड़ी घड़ी रकम तो आया है. Right? Let us check. 11,000 is here, right at the bottom. Right? So great. Answer is option B. Next, on the basis of the passage, it may be said that in terms of retrieving the money, the investors are caught between the devil and the deep blue sea, right? So should they invest? Should they reinvest? So that is the two choices that they have. It's not as if they have no exit route. ऐसा कुछ बोला नहीं कि there is no other option. Have to make do with little or no gain. Well, they may actually have to make do with a loss. So C also doesn't work. Will trust the few bright stars? No, some of the funds are bright spots, not stars, right? So answer here is option A. Devil and the deep blue sea is basically यहाँ भी खतरा है, वहाँ भी खतरा है, और दोनों choices are bad. According to the passage, one of the reasons for the euphoria can be attributed to the stock market boom, right? Not failure of the primary market, but stock market boom. So answer is option A, right? Great, guys. Let's do some grammar now. British airspace has been focusing on building European links. So it's not European connectivity, you're building links, right? So when you build links, you want to forge, you want to make a strong link. So building or forging mein difference ye hai ki forge is a very strong link. You use forging when you work with metals, right? So forge is usually, in the heat, the metals are really got into a strong strong link, right? So D is better than building or creating. Creating anyways will not work. You're not going to create links, right? You're going to make strong bonds. The appetite of banks for funds was lost under the onslaught of the slowdown. Corporates refused to borrow even as bank deposits not flourished, they increased. So you can't say that the bank deposits, flourish means what? That they grew, right? The bank deposit can just increase, they can't grow. So they were not enhanced, they swelled, you can say. So yahan pe swelling is increasing. Bank deposits cannot flummox also. Flummoxed is when you are confusing something. So your answer is option B. The 8th century revival of Byzantine learning is an inexplicable phenomenon. So something that cannot be easily explained. It's not unidentifiable. It is not yet to be discovered. We know about it. It is not incompletely explained. It is not properly explained. So answer here is option C. Great. The management can still hire freely, but cannot scold freely. But cannot scold at all. ऐसा कुछ चाहिए ना. So cannot scold at will when they want to. Cannot take decisions, ऐसा नहीं है. They can always decide to scold. Willfully here has to do with somebody is behaving willfully when they are behaving intentionally in an evil manner. तो willfully तो नहीं हो रहा. Cannot give umbrage, मतलब किसी को दुख नहीं पहुंचा सकते, किसी को minor insult नहीं कर सकते. That also will not work here. Correct? So they can hire freely but cannot scold when they want to, cannot scold at will. Many people mistake familiarity for a vulgar style and suppose that to write without familiarity, right, which is affectation, is to write at random. Okay, so familiarity is bad, and so when you write without affectation, which means you write formally, you write badly. So how can you say badly? It is not speed writing. There's no such thing as speed writing. You can't write fast. You cannot, there is always some thought. So it is not random writing. It is writing at random. So to write randomly is to write without any thought. But to write at random is to write with thought but not properly. So there's definitely a difference in the usage here, right? So answer here is option A. Great. Some critical reasoning. Efficiency is all right in its place. In the shop, the factory, the store. The trouble with efficiency is that it wants to rule how we play as well as how we work. It won't be content to stay in the shop. It follows us home, so it follows us everywhere basically. So it means efficiency can become all pervading everywhere, right? So A is best. Payment का कुछ बात नहीं है. Torture, maybe, but we are not saying efficiency is that bad completely, right? So answer is option A. Which of the following can be inferred from the above passage? In order to ease the traffic congestion, the transport planners decided to have a sophisticated system of elevated monorail travel in the city. However, it was pointed out by somebody that a metro rail system would be a more effective solution to the traffic problem. Instead of monorail, metro. The plan was thus stalled. Moreover, since a budget had not been drawn up for the project, it was deemed fit to stall the work of the monorail for some time. In the meanwhile, the traffic planners of the city decided to build an effective system of subways and flyovers in the city with the aim of easing the same problem. Okay, so transport problem planners wanted to have a monorail, but this was supposed to be more effective, so they stopped, and traffic planners went for subways and flyovers. At the instant when the planners were preparing to award the contracts, the transport planners came up with the contention that the subways interfered with the site of a pillar of the monorail system. The traffic planners had to give up the idea and think of other possible solutions. So basically क्या हो रहा है ना कि nothing is working out. Subway नहीं बनेगा, correct? तो ट्रैफिक का प्रॉब्लम है, मोनोरेल रुका हुआ है फॉर मेट्रो एंड सबवे रुका हुआ है फॉर मोनोरेल का पिलर. So city authorities did not feel it was essentially impractical. This was better. Metro was better. Strong connection between the two groups of planners. No, they are not connected. But yes, the projects would be stalled for an indefinite period of time because all of them are waiting for one another. So answer is option C. The company encourages its managers to interact regularly without a preset agenda to discuss issues concerning company and society. So you should have interactions without an agenda. This idea has been borrowed from the ancient Indian concept of religious congregation called satsang. Designations are forgotten during these meetings, hence it is not uncommon to find a sales engineer questioning the CEO on some corporate policy or his knowledge of customers. So people should meet each other without keeping all these formal designations in mind and without having an agenda, right? It can be inferred that the company is concerned about its reputation. No, the company is concerned about its progress. Believes in fostering the spirit of dialogue, right? So without into a positioning base, that's why the CEO is no longer the CEO. You can't assume they have interpersonal problems, right? So answer here is option B. Great, guys. Let's move on to the next one. It can be inferred that from Cochin to Shimla, the new culture vultures are tearing down acres of India's agricultural treasures. Ancestral owners are often fobbed off with a few hundred rupees for an exquisitely carved door or window, which fetches 50 times that much from foreign dealers, and yet more from drawing room sophisticates of Europe and the US. The reason for such shameless rape of the Indian architectural wealth can perhaps not wrongly be attributed to the unfortunate blend of activist disunity and the local indifference. Okay, because there's no unity, there is indifference. People are stealing all these artifacts and selling it at high prices. It can be inferred from the above passage that the environment created by the meeting between activist disunity and local indifference is ideal for antique dealers. Yeah, because ye attribute you can not wrongly means rightly you can attribute to this. So A is looking good. Only Indians are not proud. अरे बाकी सब के बारे में तो कुछ बात ही नहीं हुआ है to know what other people feel. Most Indian families have heirlooms which can be sold at high prices. No, my family didn't have any heirloom. India provides a rich market. That also we can't say, right? We don't know about other markets. That's why. So answer is option A. Deepa Mehta's fire. is under fire from the country's self-appointed moral police. Their contention is that the film is a violation of the Indian cultural mores and cannot be allowed to influence the Indian psyche. According to them, such films ruin the moral fabric of the nation, which must be protected and defended against such intrusions at all costs, even at the cost of cultural dictatorship. So, the moral police is saying that the film goes against India's culture and they ruin the moral fabric of the nation. Based on the information, it can be inferred that the assumption underlying the moral police critique is that the Indian audience is vulnerable to all types of influence. The assumption underlying the moral police critique is that is impressionable and must be protected against. No, it is vulnerable to moral police, moral fabric, can be broken down. Right? The moral police thinks it has the sole authority to pass judgment on films screened in India. No, it does not have, that is not what you can infer. But yes, you can infer that they feel that the Indian audience को कुछ भी तुम बताओ तो they can pick it up. Okay, so it is about culture and about moral. That is why C is a little incorrect because it just talks about moral. So answer here is option A. Yeah. 32nd. It can be inferred from the above passage. The dominant modern belief is that the soundest foundation of peace would be universal prosperity. One may look in vain for historical evidence that the rich have regularly been more peaceful than the poor, but then it can be argued that they have never felt secure against the poor, that their aggressiveness stems from fear, and that the situation would be quite different if everybody was rich. So rich are poor because they have never felt that the rich have been more peaceful because they've never felt that there can be any problem with the poor, right? So if everyone was rich, then things would be different. It can be inferred that a lot of aggression in the world stems from the desires of the haves to defend themselves against the have-nots. That's why, right, when the rich and the poor are different, things appear more peaceful. If everyone was rich, things would be different. So it would not be a foolproof measure of peace. In fact, this definitely goes against the argument. So answer is option A. Yeah. It can be inferred from the above passage that the effect produced on the mind by traveling depends entirely on the mind of the traveler and on the way in which he conducts himself. The chief idea of one very common type of traveler to see as many objects of interest as he possibly can. If he can only after his return home say that he has seen such and such, he is perfectly satisfied. Far different is the effects of travels upon those who leave their country with a mind prepared by culture to feel intelligent admiration for all the beauties of nature and art to be found in foreign lands. When they visit a new place, instead of hurrying from temple to museum, they allow the spirit of the place to sink into their minds and only visit such monuments as the time they have at their disposal allows them to contemplate without irreverent, with disrespectful haste. Okay, so the writer believes that अच्छे से you should visit places and let things sink in instead of running from one place to the other. Right? The writer prefers, we don't know what the writer prefers, he's just outlining the two types of traveler. The first, who does not understand, ऐसा कुछ नहीं है, whether who understand or does not understand, he has a different aim, the first type of traveler, he or she. The objective is not to see much, but to see well. This is clearly given. To see things without haste. So answer is option C. Whether we look at the intrinsic value of our literature or at the particular situation of this country, we shall see that the strongest reason to think that of all foreign tongues, the English tongue is that which would be the most useful to our native subjects. Right? Okay, whenever you look at a literature or the situation of this country, you will see that English is the most useful to our native subjects. Isme what can you infer? कि die-hard colonist hai, we can't say. Anybody can write this. Has the good of the nation, can't say. is addressing an issue, it's just talking about the English language, right? So answer here is option D. Nothing can be inferred. Where the film Bombay loses out is where every commercial film congenitally goes awry. By birth, congenitally is by birth, becoming too simplistic to address serious issues and failing to translate real life to real. Which of the following can be inferred? Aimed at recreating what he aimed at to make money to recreate, we don't know. The film was too simplistic for the audience taste, no, for the critics' taste. It's a commercial film, so maybe the audience liked it. The film was successful, that also we are not sure about. So answer here is again D. All the questions that we did, right? This was one CAT paper which had 10 critical reasoning questions. All of them were inference. So, aspiration is nothing new. Neither is the debate over what the Indian middle class is, what it wants, and what it buys. Since the mid-80s, that has been the focus of the economic policy papers, so-called poor and anti-poor budgets and marketing strategies that have successfully broken the barrier of urban selling and reached deeper into rural India. So what can we infer based on this? Has been the focus of economic policies? Yes, that since the mid-90s, what the Indian middle class wants has been the focus. So A is looking good. Has graduated from being deprived to the pampered. कुछ ऐसा pampering का बात नहीं हुआ है. So answer is option A, right? So great. I hope you enjoyed all the critical reasoning we did today and the two passages. Here is your puzzle, guys. For any given prime, prove that this can never be a perfect square. So do think about this. I will see you again tomorrow. Tomorrow we'll not discuss the puzzle, but tomorrow we'll talk about how financial certifications are important. The session is at 11:30. I hope to see you then, guys. And I also hope to see you on Unacademy. So as I said, this week I'm taking 2 sessions on grammatical usage. And I hope that you are a part of those sessions because really they are going to be fundamentally strong sessions on how to convert all these 10,000 rules into easy algorithms, right? How to spot errors, how to correct errors. All that will be a part of the sessions. We are also starting a plus batch soon, guys, and I hope to see you for the plus batch. I'll be doing LRDI. It is something that I'm really looking forward to because the LR section in the CAT has been a very interesting section. So a lot of puzzles, a lot of fun thinking, right? I hope, guys, you also try out the environment. It's a great environment to study from. You have live polls, you have leaderboards, right? And regular test series analysis, live doubt solving sessions, all these features, they're actually proper features within our app, right? It is not like just a chat box where you type in your doubt. These are regular features that are used where you can put in an image and we can solve. The teacher gets it on his or her screen and the teacher solves it. So these features at this cost, guys, kya cost hai? Kuch cost nahi. We have the best pricing in the industry and I hope you take advantage of it and further your CAT preparation, guys. If you're focused on CAT 20, you can look at the 6-month course. If you're confused between CAT 20, 21, or if you're sure that yes, I'm now preparing for CAT 21, then do look at the 2-year course that will take you across not just the CAT, but even the XAT, SNAP, and all the other exams after that, including your GDPI prep, right? Do use my code Munira10 to get a great discount.